All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Got Monday morning, 14 July. I'm clicking all my buttons to make sure that I just said, man, I used that Southern accent again. What is going on? So today we're going to be talking about subcontracting. Try to move my lighting here so we can actually see my face. I'm in the shadows. And recently we read an article about companies that have been declining as far as participating in government contracting. And this is typical to see year over year decline, especially in small businesses. But a report came out recently where we discovered that companies, some of them who were reported to be leaving government contracting or to no longer be selling to federal agencies, were in fact still selling to several federal agencies, but as subcontractors. That's really interesting because subcontracting is a major strategy for companies selling to the government. And by the way, primes, even like the big primes that we think about in defense contracting, often are subcontracting and prime contracting. Now, I have worked with several clients over the years who only use subcontracting as a strategy when selling to the government. So this could be a powerful way for your business to sell to the government. There is a reason that a lot of companies prefer to subcontract, and there's pluses and minuses of this. First, let's take a look at the article. Now, the article that I read recently on this is on the Federal News Network. It's titled "Defense Companies Not Exiting Market at Such a Fast Rate." So you can check that out there if you want to read the full article on your own. But for starters, why don't we go over reasons companies will subcontract and what are the benefits and then what are the drawbacks? After that, I'm going to go over best practices for subcontracting. So what are the best places to find subcontracting opportunities, best approaches for working with a prime, how to find primes that would be good partners, and what does a teaming relationship look like? And then if we have any time at the end of this, then we will potentially go over some of the tools that you can use for subcontracting specifically. So I'm going to just throw a test out here to make sure you guys can hear me. And if anybody's out there on one of the platforms, we're streaming to, let's see here, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and a few others. And again, we're just making sure that we have connectivity. So what are the positives of subcontracting? Well, if you're a subcontractor, typically you're not going to be the one that has a contract with the government. You are going to have a contract with the prime contractor. So you may work with a company who puts the official bid in and is on the hook with the federal agency, and then your contract will be with that company. So that company pays you. And what that does, and why some companies prefer this, is there is a lot of oversight. There's a lot of things like accounting and how you're invoicing with the government and some of the security parameters, and depending on the agency, there is a lot that goes into being on contract with the US federal government. Being a subcontractor can remove you from some of that, not all of it, but it can remove you from some of that. So there's a little bit of a hassle as far as some companies are concerned that can go away. Now, another big positive for subcontracting, especially if you're new to government contracting, is that you're working with a prime contractor that already has past performance. They know what they're doing, and you can draft off of them, right? So especially if you had not won a contract before or you're new to the space, a lot of small businesses will draft off of the prime contractors that have been in this for years. So that's another reason to do this, is to kind of utilize some of the company's past performance. Now, if you're really good at subcontracting and you have relationships with a variety of primes, another thing that you can take advantage of is the fact that they do have multiple agencies in some cases that they're on contract with, right? So if you've watched our channel before, I am a big believer in relationships, and especially once you're on contract with the government, upselling your federal customer. So, meaning, for instance, when I was selling for one of our companies, one of our clients who eventually hired me to run one of their defense pipelines with a couple of the agencies, almost all of the sales came from me in fact, I think all of them came from me just contacting our existing customers, letting them know about new products, solutions, making sure that everything was good to go with them. Going out and troubleshooting when I needed to troubleshoot. This builds trust, and it also gives you the opportunity to say, hey, do you need more? Hey, do you want to buy this extra service, this extra or additional tool that we're selling? And so that is a very effective way of selling to the government. So now if you're subcontracting with companies that already have these contracts in place, relationships in place, that could be a very effective way to not only potentially win a new subcontract with an opportunity you found, but to then expand with that company to some of their other customers. What are some of the drawbacks? Well, there are a lot of drawbacks. There are a lot of drawbacks, but I think the biggest drawback is that typically, if you're a subcontractor, you can find yourself out of the driver's seat and prevented by the prime from having the relationship with the federal agency. Now, there's certainly ways to avoid this, especially if you start out correctly. And I'm going to go through some of the ways that I have avoided this. But there are some primes that I've worked with that do not want you talking with their federal customer. In fact, they'll almost do anything to prevent you from it. And then I've worked with other primes where it's much more of a teaming situation where they're not trying to play I have a secret. So, you got to be careful about who you partner with, but that is one of the drawbacks. You're not the one that is the prime contractor. And often, and I think we should go into something else. This is another big focus area for when you are teaming with a company at the beginning stage before you're on contract. You can be named in the proposal and in the contract if you're a subcontractor. And that's really what you want to do, because you could team, if you're not, you could team with a company. They could put the proposal in. If they're not naming you in the proposal, if you're not going to be named in the contract, then once they're awarded, they could potentially go with anybody, not, aside from yourself. So you could have gone through a lot of work only to be maybe taken out of the mix and I have heard horror stories about this, where the prime chooses a company that they don't have to pay as much to, right? So it all goes into how the proposal is actually going to be written to the government in the beginning, but that is a really good thing to focus on. So if you are going after that subcontract, make sure your company's named in the proposal that you're going into. For those of you that have just logged on here, we were going over an article that came out on the Federal News Network. It talked about how a lot of companies who we thought were potentially leaving the government contracting space were in fact not leaving, but just moving over to subcontracting. And so, we may have had false reporting on the government side, or maybe not as in-depth as, we needed to see. And again, not surprising to me, subcontracting is a very powerful way of selling to the government. So that's what we're talking about today, best practices. And by the way, any questions you guys have, you can feel free to throw in the comments, including like, hey, how do I become a subcontractor with the US government? Because we're going to talk about some of the best practices here. Now, as far as setting up a subcontracting agreement, right? How do I find the opportunities? How do I become a subcontractor? I have a very biased approach as far as how to do this. Now, here's the wrong approach as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of companies have tried this and have failed, and then have come to us afterwards. The wrong approach is Well, hey, Rick, I can see the companies that have contracts. So I'm just going to reach out to all these companies that have contracts and offer my cybersecurity services as a subcontractor. They're already on. It's going to be fast, uh, easy, right? I don't think I've ever talked to a company that has made that work. I'm sure there's one or two out there, but what you're really doing is you're spamming companies that have contracts. Um, if they're on contract with the government, then they, especially if they know what they're doing, they had their subcontractor lined up before they even got onto the contract. They have the person doing the work. Now, you could get lucky, I suppose, and they had to fire their subcontractor and you just hit them up at the right time. But this is not the way that I've seen success if you want to be a subcontractor. The way to do it is you want to find an opportunity first. Okay. Because again, this is the long game. There's nothing quick about government contracting. What we're doing is we are finding, let's see, and I got a comment here too, which we'll get to. How should we think about teaming agreements and mentor terms of subcontracting opportunities? Yeah, we could certainly hit that today. So the way that I like to do it is I find the opportunity first and I find it early. So we're looking at sources sought, we're looking at RFIs. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Something that's coming out way before the solicitation. And then I am going to go to, say, USA Spending. I'll show you how to do this, and find a company that has past performance with the agency that put the sources sought out, right? Because now what I'm doing is I am finding companies that are more likely to win because they have past performance, they do the thing, and I'm finding it early enough where we have time to set up the teaming agreement and whatnot. This is one of the things the LinkedIn commenter had. It's asking about best practices. And because it does take time, you have to feel each other out. It's probably going to take a couple conversations before you actually pencil in that teaming agreement. And then you have to write your response. But reason this works, guys, is because you're finding an opportunity and now you're approaching a company and you're saying, hey, look, I have an opportunity with agency X. And by the way, this is just a free tip. I always contact the agency. So I'm in communication with them. So if I approach a business of any size and say, look, I'm talking with the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center about an opportunity, we can do part of it, but there's part of it that we can't do. And it looks like you've done some work with them before. Any company is going to, they're going to see that as, hey, here's somebody that's serious. They're bringing us an opportunity. Let's set up that call. They're going to be way more likely to jump on a call with you. And I've said before, I would get rid of my sales guys if they were ignoring those type of outreaches, because that's an outreach from a professional, right? That you could potentially teaming with. Good morning, Christian. Okay, let's jump into the more hands-on approach here. So I'm just going to walk through it. And again, the point of this was an article that we read that said a lot of the companies that were apparently leaving government contracting weren't leaving. They were just switching to subcontracting. And there's way more to that story as well. That was an article on the Federal News Network. Let's start off with best approach to setting up a subcontracting opportunity that you could actually win. I'm going to walk right through teaming, choosing the companies you could potentially team with, the teaming agreement, and then we'll talk a little bit about maybe some of the other tools that you can use. And essentially, I'm just going to walk through what we just described to you here. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So now we're just looking at sam.gov. And so we're going to just walk through the type of opportunity that I'm going to find. I'm just going to pick one. I'll try to zoom in on this to make it a little easy for you guys to see. So subcontracting, we talked about why companies are doing it, some of the benefits, removing some of the hassle, drafting off of companies that have past performance, and then some of the pitfalls that a lot of times you are not in charge of the relationship. But remind me if I don't get to it, because this method that I'm about to teach you, even as a subcontractor, can still put you in the driver's seat with the relationship with the office. I want to have that pre-existing relationship with the federal office, even as a subcontractor, because I don't want my prime telling me don't talk to them, right? If you do it this way, I found them to begin with. I already established communication, and I'm going to continue to talk to them because I do not want somebody cutting me out of the deal. And again, upselling your existing customers is very important. Your relationships are what's driving everything here. So when I am going to do, and this is going to just be, this is the standard way I do subcontracting with any client, any business. I'm going to start with an opportunity. So I'm in sam.gov, we're in search, but I'm not going to start with a solicitation because that's too late. As you know, if you watched us, by the time that solicitation comes out, guys, by the way, I'm Rick Howard. I'm a former government acquisitions officer for the Air Force, managed over $82 billion in contracts. I knew almost every time what company I wanted to win the contract by the time the solicitation came out. They didn't always win, but they usually did. And it's not because anything nefarious is going on. It's because those are the companies that worked in the market research phase with the government office. So we had a chance to vet them and see what they could do. They're making recommendations. And so you've got the companies that are serious and they're starting early versus the companies that are all of a sudden, the first time you hear from them is when they write a proposal. So that's not where you want to be. Where you want to be is on the sources sought side. This is just one of many ways to find an opportunity before a solicitation comes out. And this is a great way to kind of practice your subcontracting. So we have a bunch of sources sought here. Let's see here. Let's see, motorized shuttle chairs. I want to find something here that we can easily research while we're on the call here. And you can see there's a ton of stuff here. Joint training program, support services. All right, I'm going to take this just as a, let's see, July 16th. What's today? July 14th. This is should be a source of sought that's due in a couple of days for this joint training program. Right now, regarding, let's see, who is this with? It's with Department of Defense, US Transcom. Okay, now I'm not going to open this and go through the whole thing because that's not the point. The point is, how do we find the opportunities, and then how do we best set up a subcontracting agreement with a prime? So now that I have the opportunity, and so just very basically, I'm going to say, okay, this is a US Transcom opportunity. And by the way, the point of contact is going to be in here. Okay, I'm not going to click on it, so I'm not sure, but you guys can go in and find that. So I could reach out to the point of contact at US Transcom and ask them questions. I read through this entire thing and I'd come up, there's always going to be questions, guys, always. So I would go through that and I would read, I would come up with a few questions and just reach out to them. And a lot of times they're going to reply back. If not, let me know, because there are some reasons your email might not be getting through. Now, after I do that, then I know that I'm going to have to find a training company that has sold to US Transcom. So I am going to, because this is what I'm doing is I'm finding the prime. I'm the subcontractor. So I'm assuming after I read that there is some part of that source of sought that my company, maybe we're an augmented reality company and I can provide some augmented reality technology to the training program for US Transcom. But I need a prime that has sold training to US Transcom before. So now I'm going to go in here. I'm going to hit search awards. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit agency. Let's see, US Transcom, see if it comes up. US Transcom. There we go. Okay. And we did that because remember, the source of sought that we just found was with US Transcom, right? Now I want to, let's say, typically I want a small business. Now, if I read through that source of sought and I saw anything about a set aside, if I saw in there, hey, we want to know if woman-owned small businesses could do this, I would probably be looking for a woman-owned small business in here. But I'm going to go with small business. And also I'm going to put in last couple of years because I want it to be recent. Bam. Okay, so now I have a bunch of prime contractors that I can reach out to. Okay, and you can click on any one of these. Now you may want to decide based on size, because even though I clicked small business, you can see here we've got $80 million in obligations, $47 million in obligations, right? And also we haven't we haven't sorted through this based on training yet. So depending on the training, and again, I didn't go into that sources sought heavily, right? Because that's not the point of this. I've done, by the way, if you're interested in sources sought and how to respond to those, I have plenty of training that you guys can go take a look at. But a few ways to sort through. One is either by NAICS code or PSC code. If you're lucky, the training that or whatever the topic is will have its own code associated with it. That will make it easier. But if it doesn't, then you're going to have to start playing around with keywords. I find that using technical keywords and using multiple ones that have to be together are going to be the best way of sorting through this. But I'm just going to type in training for now. Okay, so let's just say that for the sake of this, that this code is going to work. Now I'm going to submit. Nothing. Okay, let's try a different code. I may have to reset my filters here. If you're not clued in on what we're doing, we are trying to find a training company that has sold to US Transcom, because we're picking a prime, right, is basically what we're doing. So agency, US Transcom, doesn't want to come in. USA spending, guys, it's free, but it ain't perfect. Here we go. US Transcom. Nope. That says Austrian. That ain't right. Why did that do it again? US Transcom. And it keeps putting Austrian in there. That's weird. For those of you just coming in, what we've done is we've gone over why some companies are actually switching to subcontracting. That initially we saw reports, and usually we do every year, of fewer and fewer companies selling to the federal government. And what they discovered is that some of them, in fact, a large portion of them, did not give up selling to the government. Some of them just weren't winning contracts. And a lot of them just switched to subcontracting. So they were reported in a different tier. So we discussed why subcontracting is preferred by some companies. Minimizes some of the hassle, drafting off of past performance from primes that have been doing this for a while, as well as some of the negatives, like not being in control of the relationship with the government customer, which is important. And now we're going to see if this will actually give us US Transcom again. Then we found a sources sought. So now, right now, we're in the best practice for how do you set up a teaming agreement. So what we did is we found an early opportunity. And the one we found on sam.gov was with US Transcom, was a training opportunity. There we go. So now if I hit submit, we're on USA spending now. So we're looking for companies that are good candidates for prime. So for me, because a lot of people use things like subnet, I don't like using any of that. I don't feel like it's because a lot of companies will say, hey, I got to be registered. In fact, some people will sell you, hey, you need to be registered in one of these databases as a subcontractor. It can't hurt, but I don't know anyone that's actually gone on contract with a company from something like that. Olivia, oh yeah, no. USA spending, guys, like I'm telling you, some of you guys are watching me struggle through this. This is just what you got to do if you want to use this. Now, USA spending is free, which is why I'm using it. Everyone has access to it. There are paid for tools that work a lot better, but where do you think they get their information from? They get it from USA Spending, SAM.gov, FPDS. They get them from the federal websites. And this is, by the way, what I'm doing right now. This is the benefit of selling to the government. For as long as it takes and as hard as it is, the fact that all of this information is public is what can give you the advantage. So this is really, it's so important. That's why I spend so much time in it, because this is what can give you the critical advantage. Okay. Now, what I wanted to do is, now that I have all of these companies, these are all companies that have sold to US Transcom in the past 4 years. And so now we can search. Well, let's try NAICS code this time. Again, I'm just showing you this as an example. Maybe training's a bad a bad code to use here. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Now let's try a keyword. Now, for all of the different products and services that you guys are offering and working with, sometimes there's just no keyword that's our product service code that is a perfect fit. That's just the way it works. Now let's see if we can find training as a keyword. This is not the best way to do this, by the way. I use keywords only when I have to. Okay, so let's just say, so Carasoft, we know is a big reseller. Here's Hillsborough Aviation. So we could go through the sources sought that we just saw, and then going through some of this. By the way, this is giving me 5 results for US Transcom. I think that this is off significantly. Maybe because US Transcom is not the contracting agency. It's possible DoD has other contractors putting them on. So there's a few ways to do this. And by the way, I could also, it doesn't have to, US Transcom, this combatant command, this could be through the Army contracting shop. So this could be through Air Force. So the next thing I could do is I could go right to just one of the agencies, and that might be a better way to do that. And there's a few other questions on here that I'll get to. So let's just, for the sake of argument, say these 3 companies are potential candidates for me to now reach out to as a subcontractor and form that teaming agreement. This is how we do it. Right. So, and again, I might, in fact, I'm just going to show you what I might do if that's all I was seeing, because that is ridiculous that there's 5 things coming through here. So, it could be through the Army, and I would find out. I just didn't want to waste everybody's time going through a sources sought notice, because that's not what this is about today. This is about subcontracting, why people are doing it, pluses and minuses. You see here. So when I switch to Army, how many results do I have now? Yeah, 8,982, right? So we can see here now we can really start paring this down. So then I would go down to recipient type, because I avoid the big primes. Depending on what you're going after, you might have to partner with a big prime. Just be prepared for a process that looks more like working with the government. Okay. If it's a small business, it's going to be much easier to work with and to put your teaming agreement together for. Okay, now, and by the way, we can keep refining this. We can refine this by total obligations, because this is a lot, and don't be, by the way, if you're not familiar, we can click on any of these companies and you will see this is all public information, and we can see exactly what they're doing. So this government services company here, all right, we can see they've received 1.9 million in the last 7 months. What about over time? I can look at 55.9 million over time, right? You could see here, big spike in 21. Usually when I see this, by the way, it has some type of COVID spending related to it. But so we could see a lot here and decide if this is a good company or not for us to reach out to. The way that I reach out to them, I just use Google. So I would Google this company. And now you can also, by the way, not just Google, you can use LinkedIn, you can use Google. But if you use Google, there's 2 ways to reach out to them. The first way I do it is I'm going to go right to their website, and usually there's a contact us page. If you go through a company's website and you're using the terms, hey, I have an opportunity I'm looking at with the US Army, I'm speaking with their office we can do part of the work. Looks like you have past performance there. Would love to set up a meeting to talk about, to see if this is a good opportunity for us to pursue together. Any sales team worth their weight's going to call you back. You can also go to LinkedIn, find their company page and see who works there. Reach out to their account executives, maybe even the CEO if the business is small enough. Okay, so that is another another thing that you could do. Now, one of the questions here was, how should we think about team agreements in the mentor-mentee programs in terms of subcontracting opportunities? Well, look, for me, the teaming agreement is, it depends. You have two different types of agreements that I usually see. The first one is, if you're talking with a company, that first call, you're usually not signing anything. You're just getting on, you're getting to know each other. You're getting to see if, it makes sense for you to work together in a teaming subcontractor prime relationship. Now, if we're talking about technology or any proprietary information, usually the next thing that comes is an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Very common. I don't know how many of those I've signed over the years. And now you're getting more into this is just the flow I've seen, right? So the more complicated a solicitation or a need from the government, technology, probably the more calls and you're going to have with the company. But if I reach out to 5 of these businesses, the way I find it, just like I showed you guys, past performance with the agency that I'm trying to bid on, usually 3 or more are going to get back to me, right? Because I have the opportunity, I'm bringing it to them. I have a relationship with the government office because I reached out to the office ahead of time. I'm asking questions. And now we're going through this process of getting to know each other. So first thing's usually the NDA. We're learning about each other's technology, each other's businesses, then the teaming agreement. Now, that teaming agreement it could apply to more than one opportunity, but I have more experience with especially with cold outreach to a company. It's probably going to be a teaming agreement based on an individual opportunity that you brought them. Okay. And what I want to make sure is that I'm not being prevented from talking with a government office. I found the opportunity. I'm already talking to them and I'm going to continue. So if we start off and we set the stage this way, right now, we should not be prevented from working with that government office, even after on contract. The other thing I wanted to mention there is, especially with this question about how do we think about teaming agreements, I want to ensure that my company is named in the proposal. So usually the teaming agreement, if I'm the subcontractor, I'm going to be involved with the proposal writing process. I'm going to make sure we're named in the proposal and that company is required to use us if awarded the contract. Let's take a look at some of your other questions here. Let's see here. Olivia, what about award type? If you could expand on that, are you just looking for, hey, how do you find the award type in USA Spending? Because I could certainly go through that. Let's see. Andre, even as a sub, be sure you have a good relationship with the prime or the government. Yeah, no question. It's so important. So important. That's why I like to use this method. Like, just to be frank with you guys, where I've had problems is working with the big defense contractors and the big primes. That's where I have been. It almost seemed like a concerted effort to keep a brick wall between me and the government customer. I have an advantage as a former acquisitions officer because I still have a really large network. So in a lot of those cases, what I use is my own network to ensure I know who's on the other side. But if you don't have that, it can be really difficult. And working with one of the big primes, there are times to do it. And, I'm not somebody that's against the primes. They provide a tremendous capability, but they're also like working with the government. They're big. And, that's all that's all I'm going to say about that. I usually go with smaller businesses that have past performance and a credible history selling to the government. Let's see. Christian, there's no such thing as dumb questions, man. When you subcontract with a company, doesn't it make you the middleman? No, it doesn't. So the middleman, I don't even know if I want to call it a strategy. That's something that's being pushed in like some social media channels. In reality, there's no such thing as a middleman, but not in government contracting. Remember, federal acquisitions is regulated by the federal acquisitions regulations. And then a bunch of policies and sub policies depending on the agencies. If you go to the federal acquisitions regulations and thousands of pages of law and Google middleman or search for middleman, you're not going to find it. Here's what you could be. You could be a prime contractor. Now, your prime contractor is your company has a contract with the government. You could be a subcontractor. Your company has a subcontract or a contract with the prime. So prime contractor, subcontractor. Now, there are some iterations on this as well. You have resellers and you have integrators, right? Which, typically an integrator would be a good example of this. Like, I will go to the defense industry for this. Like, if we're talking about like a Northrop Grumman, right, or a Boeing or a Lockheed, these are companies that will often be looked at as an integrator, depending on what the opportunity is, meaning it's their company with a contract, and then there's a bunch of other companies that are on subcontracts, and we're basically taking a variety of technologies and creating something, right? They're integrating everything and putting it together. Now, I guess you could call them a middleman, but in reality, what we're talking about is a defense contractor with decades and decades of experience that has many contracts with the government, a history of performing in subcontracts. That's not a middleman. What the middleman, I think what you're getting to, Christian, is the middleman strategy that I have been vocally very critical of, that you see in some of the social channels. What they're recommending is that you have a person, typically these are people, the people that are buying into this are people that don't have companies. They're looking at maybe starting a business. They're looking at government contracting, and they're basically telling them, hey, you can go to sam.gov and you can find a solicitation, meaning an RFP or an RFQ. And then you can find a company to do all the work, and you write the proposal, submit the proposal, and you collect the money and you pay the other company to do the work. That's usually what they're talking about with middleman. I think that is the odds of winning a contract that way are very, very low. And the only thing worse than wasting your time on a contract, on a middleman strategy, is actually winning. Even when you see like, hey, this person won an $800,000 middleman strategy, ask them what their profit margin is. Some of these interviews are like, yeah, we're not making any profit on here. It's ridiculous. And some of the people doing this, like some of the big people in the industry, have called me saying, hey, Rick, what's this sources sought market research phase that you're talking about? Like, now he's like, I have to write, it's like one of the biggest people out there. I had to write 50 proposals for a middleman contract to win one. And then I'm barely making any profit on it. And, and they're basically pushing this strategy out. There are certain industries where that might work. Most of them won't. I think it's a big waste of time. So if you're in that boat, you can see some of our other videos on that. I could go off on a rabbit trail on that. No, so this is not middleman. What this is you as a subcontractor. And what I'm talking about is you're finding an early opportunity. So the first difference is, remember, we went to sam.gov when we were looking at sources sought, right? A sources sought is not a solicitation for a proposal. A sources sought comes before that. So if we go to search in sam.gov, this is this is probably the biggest mistake companies make. Before the solicitation comes out, you have a market research phase. This is a critical phase of government acquisitions. This is where the government can talk to you. This is where you can influence things. This is what most companies don't ever engage in. They're like, oh, you mean the solicitation might not even come out for 6 months? I'm not going to waste my time here. But the companies that win, this is where they're engaging. So what you're doing is you're finding a sources sought. This is one way of finding an early opportunity that is in the market research phase. A sources sought. You can click on any of these, and basically it's going to have a series of questions that you answer. It's not a proposal. You don't win a contract from responding to this. But what it does is it puts you in contact with that office. You're helping them decide what the solicitation is going to look like. This is also where you find these early opportunities, and then to work with the prime contractors. The reason I'm looking at these is because, one, I can call the government office. They're way more likely to pick up the phone if you start here in the sources sought phase or in the market research phase, whether it's a sources sought, an RFI, even an acquisitions forecast. I've done videos on all of these. This is where you find the opportunity. Okay. The early opportunity. This is where they can talk to you. This is where they want to talk to you. Okay. So you're not a middleman. Middleman doesn't exist. You're a subcontractor. I'm finding an opportunity early, and then I'm going to USA Spending. So here's one with the VA. So what I would do differently is I'd go to USA Spending, and then I would just search up companies that were doing business with the VA instead of US Transcom that have, see, we're just taking advantage of the opportunity in federal contracting here, the advantages. Is it long? Yes. Is it difficult? Yes. But is all of the information published? All the companies that sell to the government forecasts when they're going to buy. We can see how much is being spent, how they do it. There's so much here. But I use USA Spending to find the company that I want to partner with. I'm not middlemaning because they're going to be the prime. If I'm a subcontractor, they're going to be the prime. So hopefully, Christian, that is a extremely long-winded way of answering your question. Not a middleman, you're a subcontractor. Okay. Let's get to some of the other questions. Nope. When picking the prime, should we pick the most active prime or least active in the command we are going after? This question, this is a good question because there's a lot more to this. I mean, we go very much in depth in GovClose. Sorry, this is the GovClose dashboard. GovClose is our training and certification program, year-long implementation program. So training, coaching, you can see here, we've got one of our students just got her first big win. We've got some other people in here that are just like really crushing it. Some of them are selling directly to the government. Some of them are starting consulting businesses. We teach the government sales process, how to sell to the government, and then we show them how to start a consulting business or how to sell to the government. And we work with them after. That's why it's a year-long program. So it's hard to just take a course and really know how to implement that. It's really the community and having the one-on-one, the coaching and having mentors and just working together to make it happen. And it's really, really proud of everybody in that program. Some of them are probably on this call right now. When you're picking the prime, here's the thing. Like when I jump into one of these sources sought, I mentioned that I'm going to now, because there's going to be a POC in here, there's going to be an email address for the government contracting officer or their assistant. I'm going to email them. And so some of the things I may be asking them to go more in depth on your question is, okay, what type of contracting mechanism? It may say in here, like if they're going to use GSA, then now I'm not just going to reach out to anyone that has done business with that command. I'm only going to reach out to companies that have a GSA contract that are doing business with that command. Does that make sense? So now I'm going even further. You can go really in depth here. So you want to you're picking the companies that you are going to have the best chance of winning a contract with that agency with. Okay. So some of the other things I can look at, if they're going to use a set aside, these are questions I can ask the contracting officer and the government. Are you more likely to award to, are you looking at 8A? Are you using a contract vehicle, NASA SOUP? Are you using GSA? Is this going to be openly competed? Is it possibly going to be a sole source? When is the funding? What type of funds are you guys using? Do you have the funding all aligned? So as far as most active, you need to decide if I go back to USA Spending, you'll see that some of these companies, even at small businesses, have a lot of money coming in. So what I like to do is I'm not going to super big companies. I'm just going to hit this just to show you what I'm talking about here. Here are like a lot of big companies. I can go to small business. I'm going to do that again. But I can also look at, size of awards. If you're using a paid tool like GovIQ or GovTribe, you can sort through this much easier. I could say, hey, I only want to see companies that have made under $10 million with the U.S. government. You can see here, 728 million. These are huge, huge companies, like these obligations, right? But if I might have to go like way down the line here, but I might look at a company that's doing $10 to $20 million with the federal government. You'd be surprised. A company with a $20 million contract may only have like one or two people on their sales team. So typically that's kind of where I start. Like when I see these type of obligations, I'm like, probably too big unless that's going to be warranted for the solicitation. So it just really depends. Company like this, I see a $4 million obligation. So now I want to go in and see, all right, so they made 10 million this year. They were doing really good. I'm also looking at this throughout the years. It looks like they did really good, but then declined in 23 and 24. So this is a company I might reach out to. All right, let's take a look at some of your other questions here. Olivia had another one. I hear so many times with companies that they say they want my help, but don't want to do it my way. I would need a little bit more information, but certainly, I mean, I think I hear the same thing, right? So everyone wants it their way, right? But I mean, look, if a company is reaching out to you, Olivia, and wants your help, but they don't want to do it the right way, then that's a good company not to work with, right? Oh, thanks, Christian. Yeah. So for anyone else that's still on, feel free, send your questions in here. We're talking about subcontracting. We're talking about an article that I saw here on the Federal News Network, which there's a lot in here. It talks about defense companies not exiting market at such a fast rate. It has a few things in there, but it talks a lot about how some of the companies are switching to subcontracting. And so we thought they were exiting the federal market, but in reality, they're either subcontracting or they didn't intend to exit the federal market. They just weren't winning contracts. And look, even with companies with, that look like they've been in this for a while and they really know what they're doing. I mean, at this point, since I retired from acquisitions in the Air Force in 2019, I mean, I have done consults with over 600 companies. I've had so many clients over the years that on the surface look like they know exactly what they're doing. And then, 30 million, 40 million in contracts. And then when they're talking to me, they're like, Rick, we don't know what we're doing. We're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. And we really need that regimented, disciplined approach. And so that's, that is what we teach in GovClose. And that's how I help companies still today. Here, we got another question in here. Olivia, have you seen subcontracts won from the prime contractors with subcontracting plans? Yeah, sure, of course. But I think at the end of the day, with all of the plans and all of the systems out there, it almost always comes down to the opportunity that is before you. Sometimes with the big companies, if they have a mentor protege program or they have a subcontracting plan, they may be incentivized to use subcontractors a little bit more. And, in big picture, they may leverage that. But I don't know, for you, for the small business person, the account executive, I always start with the opportunity because that's what I see companies really doing, right? They're going to look at each opportunity as an individual. I don't want to use the word entity, but they're going to try to make the best case for them winning that opportunity, especially if they've been in this game for a while, right? So, I focus less on things like that and more on me finding an opportunity that I think I'd be a good fit for, and then finding a really good company that I could team or partner with that needs me, right? That's not so big where I'm just going to drown in their huge team, right? They need me. I brought them an opportunity. I have the relationship already because I've reached out and asked questions. And maybe by the way, I could respond to this source of SOT before I even have my teaming partner. I can respond to the source of SOT a couple times. The rules with source of SOT, guys, are not the rules with writing a proposal. It's far less stringent. You can put whatever you want into a source of SOT. By the way, I recommend taking a look at some of our source of SOT videos because there's a lot that you can pack into that. Ben, what advice do you have for a company that's looking to move into a new space, cyber, where we have experience but not mentioned in our current contracts? So past performance is difficult to provide. So Ben, if what you're asking me is if you're saying that your company has government contracts but not in cyber, right, and you want to move into that space, what's the best way to do that? I find the best way to do that is to slowly expand, right? So if I was, um, let's say that I was, construction might be a bad example of this, but if I was in, let's say I was in construction, I'm in construction and I've maybe done some remodeling in hospitals. And then I am going to expand into areas where, hey, I'm building and supporting some of the infrastructure for, if they have, because they have HIPAA requirements and all these other things in hospitals. So I can branch out from just regular construction to, maybe setting up some of their computer and information systems. And then, slowly expanding to, okay, now I'm going to include some of the cybersecurity systems as well. It's harder to make a direct, especially in cybersecurity, by the way, because if you were trying to go from like, hey, I'm selling accounting services to I want to implement a software tool on a classified system, right? Well, there are a lot of barriers to entry there because you have approval to operate, you have CMMC, you have potentially FedRAMP, depending on exactly what you're doing. So, what you might do in a case like that is if you have a software tool, hey, I'm going to try to implement that software tool with my current customer in a non-classified environment, which is still a hard thing to do. But since you have the relationships already, working with that team, trying to see what would they be willing to trust you with is a way to do it. Subcontracting is another way, right? If you're a prime in one area, you may be able to subcontract with a company that has experience in the area you're trying to get into, and you can draft off of them. All right. So Jimmy, if I was providing acquisitions 1102 and programs, draft up a statement of work, an acquisition strategy, what type of efforts in prime should I look at since work is getting cut and moved to GSA? Well, okay, there's a lot we're assuming there, right? So if you know that certain contract is going to go to GSA, then I'm just going to work with companies that are on GSA, right? Or get a GSA schedule myself. By the way, you may want to check out, we did a video with Kevin Kivlin on GSA. I'm going to have him back on here just to talk about, where they're going now. He was a senior leader at GSA for decades. I worked with him when I was on the Air Force side. He was trying to get me to use GSA with them. I didn't, but certainly a lot of my counterparts did. And he's really smart. His thing was GSA is going to probably increase in certain areas, but not in others. So keep in mind, and by the way, what Jimmy's probably referring to here, guys, if you haven't seen it, is the U.S. government has essentially, hold on, I don't really need this on here anymore. The U.S. government, this administration put out an executive order regarding GSA, using GSA, having GSA, take over some of the contracting efforts that are typically done by other agencies. GSA initially, like even back in the 50s, was supposed to be this, this agency that was the hub of acquisitions to, take over acquisition support for the other agencies. And in theory, streamline it, maybe take some of the workload off the other agencies. But in reality, they only took some of it because A, they're not big enough to do all of the contracts. And B, a lot of the agencies don't want them involved, right? Like I didn't want GSA involved because GSA is kind of a middleman. Someone mentioned middleman earlier. I didn't, as a government acquisitions officer, which I'm retired now, I'm not an acquisitions officer for the Department of Defense anymore. I didn't want GSA or anybody else between me and the company that I was paying to develop a technology that I was giving to the warfighter, because that just would take even longer. But GSA actually, they're very good in certain areas. They're very much involved with, products and commodities. And what Kevin said during the GSA interview was that we might see them increasing in areas that are non-mission related, not mission essential type thing. So if it's like, hey, the Department of Defense is developing a technology for the warfighter, I don't expect to see GSA there. Maybe I might see them as a, if that turns into a SaaS, like a software as a service yearly license, I might see them, might see GSA a little bit more there. I think the point of this is I look at each opportunity and I look at what I know, not what the government's saying, not what, when I say the government, I want to know what my customer's saying. So you're always going to ask your customer, hey, are you moving to GSA? Are you moving to NASA soup? The government says lots of things and they put lots of policies out there, right? They put a policy out there. Let me give you an example. They put a policy out there 5 or 6 years ago saying that every agency is going to redo their websites for user experience, right? Look at where I'm at here, right? sam.gov, USA Spend. Look, the government agencies, none of the government agencies are going to redo their websites for user experience unless they have money to do that and a written requirement. So there could be a policy that they could use as a basis for requirement. And there's an official process, but they have to be told to do that. They have to have the money to do it. So for GSA, and GSA, by the way, also was cut, right? A bunch of GSA personnel were cut from GSA. So saying we're going to increase GSA's workload with less people, again, don't make any rash decisions, I guess is what I'm saying, and talk to your government customer. And if it does look like the work's moving to GSA, you guys know that you can see what companies have GSA schedules, right? And if not, so there's a couple things you could do. Go to GSA eLibrary and you can check out lists of, you can see exactly what companies have the GSA schedules. And something else you could do, this is Govly. I've interviewed them. They've been on my podcast a few times. Govly can match subcontractors with prime contractors that have these big contracts. So if you wanted to subscribe to Govly, you could also do that. Guys, don't forget GovClose. If you want to join our program and work with our community, head on over to GovClose. That's my small sales pitch. Oh, I'm not even sharing my screen. I thought I was sharing my screen with you guys. I was going to say, hey, here's Govly, Govly. So again, this is good if you want to partner with primes that have like the bigger contract vehicles. If you think that your current government customer is going to move over to a vehicle that you don't have, this could be a good tool. Other than this, you could go, if it's GSA specifically, go to the GSA eLibrary and check that out. And that's another place you can find those companies that have them. And then you can start reaching out. Again, you have an opportunity. You find it early. We just did it on USA Spending. It's a really good way to do that. We have a couple other questions here that I'll get to before I close it down. Oh, what is that? Okay. What else do we got? Christian, let's say, for example, I find a source is sought for pest control. Do I have to know everything about pest control to talk to the POC, or do I find a pest control guy and then we both talk to the POC? Well, Christian, what I would ask you is, what are you trying? Do you have a company right now? Right? We're talking about subcontracting. If you're going to be a subcontractor, you need a company that does something to be on a contract for, right? So if you are going after, again, so what you're kind of, this reads as a middleman thing, which again, I am against, right? If you don't have a pest control company and you don't have any experience selling to the government, why on earth would I want you involved with the government contracting? Like, as a government acquisitions guy, I don't want a middleman. I'm not putting anyone on contract that either doesn't have past performance or isn't the subject matter expert on the thing or service that I need. That's what matters, right? Now, Christian, if, for instance, you're interested in government contracting as a business, but you don't have a business, and I don't mean an LLC. Anyone can file for an LLC. I mean, you don't have a pest control business. You don't have a company. You're just looking to start a business. That's where, I mean, I would tell you to go to GovClose, learn how to sell to the government, and then either go get a job working for a company that sells to the government, which are very high paying jobs. Those are great jobs. Or start a consulting business, figure out something. That's what we teach. Learn something real. You could learn the power of subcontract. You could learn the power of subcontracting like it's a superpower. You could learn the process of subcontracting, and you could help companies with subcontracting. And the way that would work is, so for instance, you're saying, hey, do I have to know anything about pest control to talk to the POC? Well, if you're excellent at subcontracting, or you learn everything about pest control contracts with the government, well, now what you're doing is you're reaching out to that company, not to like try to go after a contract with them and you're going to be a sub, but you're selling to them as a consultant. So like, hey, pest control company, I've got 3 opportunities with the Department of Defense for pest control in your area. And if you want to work with me, you can pay me $4,500 a month to help you win this $1 million pest control contract. There's a lot that goes into it besides that before you get to that point. But I just wanted to point that out. So I'm not sure if you have a company or not, but all right. Well, guys, we've been on here for about an hour now. We have talked a lot. Let's just review. We've talked about the article by Federal News Network that essentially is saying, hey, the companies aren't exiting the market at such a fast rate because what we didn't realize is they're not just getting out of it because they don't like the government. A lot of them are going to subcontracting, which is what caught my eye. And then a lot of them were also, they didn't intend to get out. They just weren't winning contracts. So they weren't using a lot of the processes that we talk about here and on our YouTube channel and on LinkedIn. From there, what we did is we talked about some of the pluses and minuses. The big plus for subcontracting is, since you're not the prime, there's a lot of minutia that you don't have to deal with. And you can also draft off of a prime's past performance, which is a huge, huge benefit. The negatives, I think one of the biggest negatives are you're not in control. And government contracting, the relationship with the government customer is so important that you want to approach subcontracting from the standpoint of control, which is find the opportunity, establish a relationship, then reach out to the prime. Hey, I already got the relationship, prime, so you can't block me from who the POC is because I found them and I'm talking to them already. So that's what we were talking about. And the way to do that, you find a sources sought, or maybe an acquisitions forecast, or someone through your network. Then you use USA Spending to find companies that have past performance with the agency that has an upcoming opportunity. And then I'm reaching out to these companies with an opportunity. I'm not begging them. I'm not sending 1,000 emails to like every company that has a contract saying, hey, I provide cybersecurity, please work with me. I'm not begging anybody. I'm reaching out to maybe 4 or 5 companies that have the past performance with the agency that I'm selling to, and they do that thing. It's their specialty. And I say, look, I have an opportunity with the U.S. Army. I can do part of it. I can see you have past performance with the Army as well, and you specialize in the thing that we need. Let's set up a call to see if this is a good opportunity to work on. They're going to want to talk to you because you brought them the opportunity, because you're talking with that office already. You're doing the hard part already, right? So they're going to want to talk to you. And now I can form our teaming agreement based on the fact that I have this relationship already. So I'm kind of in the driver's seat in a way, even though they're probably going to be the prime. We're going to work on the proposal together. I'm going to be named in the contract, in the solicitation, the proposal that we write. You've got to make sure your company is named in that proposal, because you don't want them to be able to just use anybody if they win the contract. So we're putting parameters in here to protect us, that it could be in the teaming agreement as well. And I would absolutely ensure that it's in there. Nothing that prevents you from talking with the end user. You want to be talking with the end user, meaning the government customer. And then we covered a variety of questions in here, from middleman questions to, how to best communicate with some of the contractors on the other side. What else did we talk about? I don't know if I got to this one. Oh, no, I did. Pivoting from one industry to another. I certainly talked about that. And then, of course, I gave my usual plug. If you do want to join our community in GovClose, if you want to go through our implementation and certification program, whether you want to improve your sales to the government, or you want to start your own consulting business or get a job, an account executive job, by the time we're done with you, you're going to be able to analyze federal data and talk about government contracting specific to any company at a level that most people are never able to do. And that's why they're getting jobs. So our consultants are winning contracts. And it's really, by the way, really a great community. That's really what you're paying for. I onboard everyone myself. We have coaching calls every week, both for people going through the government sales training, so learning how to sell to the government, and then the implementation phase, which is the hardest part, right? Like, hey, and the awesome part, which is let's launch our business. Whether you're a company selling to the government already, whether you want to do consulting or get that job, that's what we're doing, guys. And today, hopefully you got something out of this as far as subcontracting is concerned. I'm thinking about doing this every day during the weekdays. So if you think that's a good idea, let me know. And if you want us to do certain topics, cover those, we'll do that as well. So, that's where I get my ideas for all this. I read through all your comments. Some of you are emailing us directly. You can always jump on a call. If you do go to this website, govclose.com, what's going to happen is you put your name in here. It's going to take you to a free overview video. And you can set up a call with one of our advisors. If you're in the military or have any military experience, you'll talk to Hal. You'll talk to Luke. If you're a professional looking to get into this space, here's a link to the website. And yeah, from there, it's just learning, hey, is the program right for you? And if not, just check out our YouTube channel. We have free videos there. LinkedIn, we're doing the LinkedIn lives, interviews with the CEOs, lots of instructionals. All right, guys, I'm out. Have a good week. Cheers.
After going through the course, I was able to land a client that pays me a monthly retainer to actually help them develop their business and go after these federal contracts.
I was able to get a consulting gig with a software company that currently works with the intelligence community.
Within 2 months, I had my first client. So the initial contract was for a 3-month contract for $4,000 a month.
So 27 years old, you've never worked in government contracting, you've never worked as a consultant, and you just closed your first deal, is that correct?
That's fair. And I've got a couple small projects on the side as well. So definitely probably my best investment I've made all year.
A cold call landed a 9-figure government contract.
Start a consulting business and a high salaried position as a account executive in public sales. So you're doing both of those things.
I'm living the best of both worlds right now.
So my name is Mike Knickerbocker. I am a naval officer that's getting ready to retire. Right now, I have 3 firm clients and 2 more perspectives. I'm able to provide value across different industries because the skill set that I learned through the course, I was able to apply my own experience.
GovClose came and it was a no-brainer. I wanted some secret sauce.
This has allowed me to live in Germany. It's a little hazy today, but we can do that. You see?
Oh yeah, dude, that's beautiful.
The content, the training, it's invaluable. It's written.
And Deb, what motivated you to join the GovClose certification program?
Wow. Well, I think that wanting to work with a leader in the field, someone who understands government contracting on a deep basis and has the reputation, the experience working with you and your company was a natural.
The students that graduate our program, they go on to start their own consulting firms, winning high dollar consulting clients. They go on to land high paying salaried positions as account executives with companies that sell to the government. I'm so proud of the people that have gone through our program. And if you are considering either a job or a business, and by the way, some of our students are doing both, as I did. They're running a consulting business and they'll have an account executive job. It's transforming their lives. It's bringing true wealth to them and their families. Back to the video.